2NURFM, a broadcast service of the University of Newcastle.
Green corridors. We've had a long-term grant here with Ausgreen and Muswellbrook Council and also Conservation Volunteers of Australia, trying to spend some of the government's money on farms around this region to promote connectivity between one lot of trees and another lot of trees, so that we could plant trees down the fence lines, we could grow isolated trees in a clump in the middle of a paddock and so on. And that's all because we're trying to look at promoting more vegetation, but also we're trying to give a way for plants and animals to move as the climate changes. So that's underway, but in Canberra, they've had a project running much, much longer with planting green corridors, planting along fence lines and so on. And they've just released some of the data on that, which shows that it's good for agriculture as well. So it's not just good for the greenie idea of, yes, we'll allow the species to move, the birds to move from plot to plot and so on, but it's also good for agriculture. And so what they're seeing down there, by looking at what the effect of these clumps of trees are, is that they are seeing increased crop yields because insect populations are increasing. They're seeing better lamb survival rates because the animals are being protected more. They're seeing an increase in carrying capacity, and also they're also seeing increase in bird populations, the return of reptiles. And so at the end of the day, it not only benefits the biodiversity of species around the place and making sure that some of them are able to handle new conditions of weather, but also agriculture it benefits as well.
It's interesting. I spent a couple of years, we lived on a farm. We weren't farmers, we were just living on the farmhouse while a house was being built out the back of a place called Balawi, which is halfway between West Wyalong and Barmed, but loved living on the farm. It was a wheat farm. And you talk about green corridors, whilst there was natural bushland around along the side of the roads, you didn't generally see a green corridor in a paddock. We're talking 1975, 1976. It was just stubble for miles and miles. Then the wheat would come along, and then you'd just see wheat for miles and miles. Are there any benefits in relation to bees? And does a lot of thought go into what is actually planted in those green corridors? Or is it just slap some trees in, put some natives in? Or is there a little bit more thought going into what's planning region for region?
Basically, I think the success of it is that once you get the planting, and obviously you need to plant the vegetation that was there before, so that's the selection of the trees and so on. But once you get the trees growing, then you get the understory, then you get the litter on the ground, then you get the increase in carbon moving into the soil, but also you get the increase in all of those creatures, insects that break down the leaves that are rotting on the ground and so on, which leads to more birds coming in, which leads to then a normalisation of the area. The problem with having just a field of one particular plant is, if you get an insect in there that attacks that plant,
it's gone.
Then it's gone. And so if you have a good population of birds around, then you have the chance of control by other species. And it's really that pyramid of control that I think is behind this benefit that the farmers are seeing.
I suppose one of the big things also is, depending on where you plant it, the potential breeze benefit where topsoil's not being lost. So it really is win-win-win.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the comments that the particular farmer made in response to this was planting a huge group of trees on top of a hill meant that the cattle and so on would go up to the top of the hill to rest out of the sun or out of the weather, which means that they put their droppings up there, which means that all of that nutrient then washes down the hill and fertilises down the hill. And so having these green corridors, having these stepping stones of green has this benefit not only for a particular bird that you think mightn't like to fly long distances out in the open, but also for the farmers.
Fantastic. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Professor Tim Roberts, Director of the Tom Farrell Institute for the Environment at the University of Newcastle.